Okay, so in this video, I'm going to be looking at Wordsworth's poem A Complaint from the Edexcel English Literature Poetry Anthology from the Relationships unit. So when we're looking at this poem, the, I guess, key terms to do with this poem are metaphor and extended metaphor, just knowing the difference between the two. We've seen this before in Valentine, where the metaphor is repeated throughout. It doesn't change what the object actually is that the person's being compared to, or the in this case, love is being compared to. So in Valentine it's an onion, and in this poem it's water. So just remembering that a metaphor is a direct comparison between two things without using like or as, such as my love's eyes are the ocean. That is a metaphor. And an extended metaphor is variations on that same image which continue throughout the poem. So in in Valentine, the onion is continually related to a relationship in lots of different ways, but the image is always the onion. And in this poem, it's the kind of image of water that's likened to the relationship throughout. So there are a few romantic poems in this collection, and that's romantic with a capital R, meaning that the poets were part of the romantic movement rather than they're just romantic poets who like romance. So the romantic poems in this collection are La Belle Dame sans Merci, A Child to His Sick Grandfather, She Walks in Beauty, and this one, A Complaint. So you need to know a little bit about context for every one of these poems in the anthology. In this particular this particular poem is written by Wordsworth, um, and Wordsworth and Coleridge, another romantic poet of the era, were very good friends, and they were both practicing the romantic form of literature. So they placed the spontaneous overflow of emotions at the heart of their work, which was very much a thing that the romantic poets did. And they were kind of the two of the real kind of people who built up the romantic movement. So it laid the foundations for later romantic poets who emphasized pure emotion and used emotion as a unifying theme in their writing. After 3 years abroad in Malta, Coleridge returned to visit his once close friend Wordsworth, and he returned in 1806. And everyone present apparently felt the change in the two poets' relationship. And some people think that this might be the subject of this poem. Coleridge had also had a drug addiction at this time. Um, Lots of people took drugs mainly for pain relief, but sometimes recreationally. And poets seem to do that quite a lot, possibly because they were trying to find some kind of higher realm in which to write literature. Um, so it may be because of his drug addiction as well that Wordsworth did not like. Also, when we're talking about a relationship here, we're talking about a platonic relationship, that is a friendship. But it was a very deep friendship, and it wasn't unusual for men to say that they loved their friends and women to say that they loved their female friends as well, without making it a romantic relationship. However, there may be a context here of a slightly romantic relationship. We may never know, but we do know that the two were very good friends, so we take it to be a platonic relationship. It doesn't necessarily have to be a romantic breakup. There can be lots of different breakups in relationships. You know, can break up with a friend, and that quite a lot is felt quite deeply as well, almost heartbreaking if the friend has been very close to you for some time, and then suddenly you either grow apart or something happens that stops the friendship. And that's what this poem is about. Okay, so hopefully if my pen works, we can start annotating. So first of all, I'm going to look at the structure and the rhyme scheme. That's the one I always really do first. So the poem has a very regular rhyme scheme. It's A, B, A, B, C, C. So if you see that you've got the A rhyme here, pour, door, the B rhyme here, a go, flow, and then a rhyming couplet at the end, heed and need. And that continues in each stanza. There are 3 stanzas in this poem. It's written in iambs. We know iambs are the unstressed and stressed. But unlike Shakespeare, iambic pentameter, where you have 10 syllables, this is actually iambic tetrameter, which is 8 syllables. So there's 4 iambs per line. If I can annotate it, the meter, there is a change, and I am poor. And that continues throughout. Your love hath been not long ago. So it's a very regular poem. And it's written in sestets. So this stanza has 6 lines, and a 6-line stanza is called a sestet. So knowing all this terminology is just going to help. But you can't just say this poem is written in 3 sestets. It has a very regular rhyme scheme, and it is in iambic tetrameter. That's all very good, well and good, and quite impressive with your knowledge of terminology, but you need to say why you think the poet has done this and relate it to the question in some way, whatever that may be. So the rhyming couplet, perhaps at the end of each stanza, could represent the close connection between the speaker and their friend. And even though the pair have drifted apart, the close rhymes are still consistent, perhaps showing that they're still closely linked despite the loss. And the fact that it's very, very regular throughout shows that perhaps that Wordsworth is saying that he believes the friendship will always be there no matter what it looks like now. That's something we could perhaps say about it. Okay, so that's the form and structure, and we'll concentrate a bit more on language and structure now. So the first thing you might see in this poem is that there's quite a lot of caesura. And as you might imagine, in a poem about separation or growing apart, that's possibly used to show that separation. And that's a bit similar to how separation shown in one flesh with caesuras like this as well. And it also brings attention, as all caesuras do, to the words. And if you pause after a word, it gives the word before or after a dramatic effect. Okay, so I think in this one, obviously, if you're looking at the first line, there is a change, and I am poor. The word "and" isn't necessarily the important one here, but the word change is. Okay, and that may well be the theme of the overall question, because this is a poem very much about change in relationships, in any kind of relationship, but this one is a friendship that has changed somehow. He's not saying it's over, it's ended, but there has been a change. And Wordsworth is recognizing the fact that this has been a negative change. I am poor. This is obviously a metaphor, um, implying that the lack of friendship has left him um, worse than before. He feels like he can't really do anything. He can't amount to anything without this friendship. So it's left him metaphorically poor. Oh, that's easy to read, isn't it? Has left him with nothing, I'm going to say. And then, as I say, he talks about love, but we're assuming that it is platonic love. You can write about the fact that it might be a bit more than platonic love, but I wouldn't press the point too much in your GCSE, because you'll possibly make quite tenuous links and go all over the place with it, and you'll miss out actually talking about the real truth of this, which is whether it is a romantic relationship or platonic, it's about a change in the relationship, and that's the main thing. And he talks about the past in this one. So this stanza is very much talking about how the relationship was in the past. Your love hath been nor long ago a fountain at my fond heart's door. So we've got here this bit, nor long ago, means and quite recently, showing how recent this change has been. And that might hurt even more. And of course, then you start the extended metaphor of water, and this at this point the water is in the form of a fountain. You have the extended metaphor here. I mean, at the moment it's a metaphor, but it becomes extended. Metaphor of water, and the alliteration of fountain and fond here, that brings attention to both of those words. My fond heart's door. Fond meaning really quite loving. Okay. Also, you've almost got a personification of heart here. The heart is like lives in a little house, um, showing how close they used to be. The fountain was right at the door of his heart. It was that close to him. And what is interesting to do is look at the different metaphors to do with water. And the first one is a fountain. So when you think of a fountain, it's important to not just say, oh, this metaphor shows that he loves him, or that they used to have a close relationship. Why does it? What does a fountain represent? Well, a fountain is quite over the top, isn't it? And the thing about a fountain is it's kind of fast, perhaps um, very high. Everyone can see it. It's like a thing of beauty. And so therefore that's how he's talking about the friendship in the past, something that everyone used to be able to see and admire as well as him. And they talk about the alliteration of the F sounds continue with the flow and the repetition of flow here, whose only business was to flow, and flow it did. Okay. So he's saying that it's like an outpouring of emotion here. The fountain flowed as their love flowed, their friendship. And not taking heed, that means not taking any notice of its own bounty or my need. So it's saying it was a very natural thing. It didn't do it for any reason, didn't do it for itself, it didn't do it for Wordsworth's need for this friendship. It just did it because it was just there. It just grew naturally and organically, very much like a fountain of water, or water itself is very natural and organic. Also, if you're thinking about water as an image, it's necessary for life, isn't it? And that's how important he's saying this friendship was to him, in the form of this beautiful fountain. Okay, next stanza starts with kind of him thinking about what that meant to him at the time. This is the present now. He's remembering the past. So there's kind of an exclamation here of it's kind of an exclamation of joy, but it's remembering joy that he isn't feeling at the moment. So you might say it's an actual exclamation of despair, because he's not feeling that now. What happy moments did I count? And that's not a question. Note that there's an exclamation mark at the end. That is an end stopped line. Quite a lot of these are now end stopped here. And quite a lot of this stanza is exclamative lines with the exclamation marks. And then you've got a couple of rhetorical questions here, suggesting that he's just unsure. He's so confused. He doesn't know why this friendship has come to an end. He doesn't understand. His mind is in turmoil, you might say. So what happy moments did I count? Again, that's just an exclamation of there were so many happy moments. It's not a question. It's not asking someone how many happy moments. He's saying, I did count so many happy moments. And then he's remembering that he was blessed then. He might not even have realized it at the time. Blessed was I then, all bliss above. And you've got the alliterative blessed and bliss, alliteration, and that's kind of religious imagery there. And if you think about it, water is quite a religious image in itself because you're baptized. Water kind of baptizes you and fills you with the love of God, and that's what he's even comparing this relationship to the love of God. I was blessed, was I then, or bliss above, and consecrated fount. Okay, something consecrated is something made holy. So it's a holy thing to him. It's religious. That's how pure the love was, and strong, as in your love for God as a Christian. And here you get a rule of three, or a listing with the caesuras in between to bring attention to each of these words, each of these adjectives: murmuring, sparkling, living, love, alliteration again. If we look at those three words a bit deeper, because he wants us to, because that's why he's put caesuras there, to bring attention to each one. Murmuring, it's kind of out loud. It's love out loud, okay? It's not quiet, but it's not shouting. A murmur is something quite comforting and intimate. You might murmur to a close friend or lover, um, just something for you and them to hear and nobody else. Sparkling, there's a kind of vibrancy to that, effervescence, something exciting and joyful about sparkling. And living love, and again, the water is life, and the relationship was like life to him. And it might also be kind of reminiscent of, again, the baptismal water that is, supposed to give you new life. And then here comes his rhetorical questions. What have I? Shall I dare to tell? So I had then this amazing fountain, this beautiful fountain, which was murmuring, sparkling, living. And what have I now? Shall I dare to tell? He doesn't even want to say it. Okay. He is scared to admit it in this rhetorical question here. Because now, look at the juxtaposition here. It turns from a murmuring, sparkling, and living love to a comfortless and hidden well. Look at the juxtaposition of adjectives. It's now comfortless, it's hidden. Whereas a fountain was on top, on display, a well is underground. It's that their love is now hidden and nobody can see it, unseen. However, if something's hidden, it doesn't mean it's completely gone, does it? It doesn't mean it's disappeared. He's not saying the fountain's now dry. He's just saying it's not a fountain anymore. It's turned into a hidden well. Now, you might think, and this is up to your own interpretation, any other interpretations of that perhaps it once was a love that they were allowed to say out loud, of friendship, and now it's something that they need to hide. Again, I wouldn't go too deep with that, no pun intended with the well, but it may be an interpretation of that. Okay, and then the last stanza, he again repeats a well of love. So it's still there. He admits that even though there's a change, but love is still there. And there's where a caesura comes again, a big dash, as in a big pause caesura. It may be deep, I trust it is, and never dry. So what he's saying here is, through the extended metaphor, I'm just going to put ext metaphor, showing the friendship will always remain. He says never dry, but has changed. And I'm going to say for the worse, because that's certainly how it seems. and it may be deep. And again, is he talking about the depth of their friendship? Or is he saying it needs now to be hidden in some way? Perhaps he is talking about the fact that Coleridge was a drug addict and Wordsworth can't be seen with him anymore for his reputation. And maybe that's what he's talking about. And then he kind of end stops this line here. And what matter? So what? So he's asking himself here, does it really matter if there's this change? So again, that's a rhetorical question he's asking himself. Does it really matter? Rhetorical question. If the waters sleep in silence and obscurity, something obscure is kind of forgotten or not easily understood. Okay. He doesn't mind that the waters sleep here, and again, here that's personification. The water is not dry; it's still there. It just sleeps. It suggests that it might wake up one day. Suggests it may start again. And then again, he has like a pause now at the beginning of a line, and it's to bring attention to this again, the word change, which is already used in the poem. So you've got repetition of that word change. Such change this time. It emphasizes the amount, the kind of depth of their, I'm going to call it a breakup, but you know what I mean. And then again, he repeats the image at the very door of my fond heart. It was, you were so close to me. He repeats that whole image. It's like a circular image, really, because it happened in the first stanza and then in the last stanza. So he repeats the image and the poem becomes circular, stating how close they once were. You were once at the very door of my fond heart, and the change has happened there. And again, reiterates that it's made him poor. He reiterates the negative effect of the change. So it starts out saying that there is a change and I am poor. Your love have been no long ago a fountain at my fond heart's door, and ends with such change and at the very door of my fond heart hath made me poor. So he's really emphasizing what a terrible thing this breakup, whatever that has been to him. So overall, this poem has themes of loss and joy within it. It's the narrator grieves for the love that they've lost, and this is introduced in the very first stanza. And then the differences, the juxtaposition between the past and present, continue throughout the poem. But the narrator is obviously sad at the loss, but seems to come to terms with the fact that this change is perhaps irreversible, but I feel that they're leaving the door open a little bit by saying that the waters sleep in silence and obscurity, but they could be found again and they could wake again. So there's a slight bit of hope left there, I think. Um, and then that's the kind of loss, and the joy is when the narrator speaks about the love that used to be. And that's the enthusiasm's evident by the exclamation marks, exclamative sentences and the lively adjectives like murmuring, sparkling, and living, making it clear how powerful their love once was. So, a good poem to compare this to, if this was the printed poem from the anthology, would be another one that had extended metaphors, maybe, that you could talk about how the metaphors talked about love generally, so Valentine. Um, but a poem, seeing as they usually compare thematically, perhaps a poem that is about loss and change, so perhaps Neutral Tones, perhaps The Manhunt, perhaps One Flesh is definitely a good one about change in a relationship. Um, so any of those would be a good poem to compare this one to. I hope that was helpful.